Hi everyone, welcome to the MBN Boss and Data podcast. In this episode, the topic is around how companies are actually using GenAI. Today I'm joined by Balleyguier, Head of ML Field Engineering at Snorkel AI. Andre is an AI leader in machine learning, scaling teams and driving business impact. He's experienced in AI strategy, implementation across areas such as insurance, banking and manufacturing. In 2021, Andre was named in the Data IQ Top 100 as one of the UK's most influential data leaders. Previously, Andre was VP of Applied AI at DataRobot for over 8 years, where he built and led international AI teams across the EMEA and APAC regions. Currently, Andre leads AI solutions and engineering for Snorkel AI in the EMEA region. Andre, thanks for joining me today. I'm keen to get straight into this, and the topic's really interesting too, so it's really good and a rare opportunity to speak to someone with a hyper-focus within the GenAI space. My first question to you, could you tell me a little bit more about your career within data to date, why you chose to become a data scientist, and why AI has been such a focus and passion throughout your career?
Yes. So first of all, thank you, Josh, for inviting me to the podcast. So very happy to talk about my journey, but also some of the problems I'm seeing right now in the market. It's a very exciting time to be in AI. About my career up to date. I initially worked in finance. I was at uni studying engineering and math, and I thought I was not that into electrical engineering or electronics, and I really was more attracted to the jobs around numbers, right? Around how to apply mathematical concepts into something that can be into models that could be applied into the business, right? But initially, I kind of landed in finance, thinking it was a great space to be in. But I had my first job in finance in 2011, which was not necessarily the best moment to be in finance. It was right after, in the aftermath of the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, and the atmosphere on the trading floors made me think that I had to rethink where I wanted to work, which industry. And so that's why I decided to look around and started to get in love with machine learning. I had the first course in machine learning. The first one I followed was in 2011, course from Andrew Ng on Coursera that a lot of people have since then followed. I think I was on the second edition of that course, so in the very early days. No one knew what a data scientist was at that time. So that's the funny part, right? I was telling all my friends at uni, I want to be a data scientist. I want to do and use machine learning in a business context. And they were telling me, what? Are you crazy? This is for robotics. This is for signal processing or image. That's it, right? And they didn't realize there were applications well beyond that. It was a time where Gartner was saying, big data everywhere. You have to hire data scientists. It will be the sexiest job of the 20th century. That was basically what was out there at that time, right? So I decided to then go back to masters, specialize in AI. I graduated with my masters in both math and engineering. I kind of tailored my profile to become a data scientist. And at that time, we had to do some research, a bit like now with LLMs, to be fair. And so then I did some research in Singapore, came back to Europe, found my first job in London as data scientist. I picked London because it was probably one of the early active markets in machine learning and AI. And I thought it was a good place to start. Started at Sky as the first big data, team in Sky, working directly with the CTO, the CMO. And it was quite an exciting time. But then as they tried to integrate us with the business, I thought it was from a management perspective and how we are led as a team, it was probably going against innovation. And that's where I thought, I probably am more tailored and suited to work in a startup. And by that time, I was contacted by DataRobot. DataRobot at that time was a very small Series A company. I had met a French guy who was number one on Kaggle in Singapore. He's French like me, and he was number one on Kaggle. He was working in the same company as me, in same research institute. And he basically told me that he was joining DataRobot at the time I was leaving Singapore. And so 2 years later, they were starting to hire in Europe. They contacted me a bit out of the blue, and I thought, wow, it's a company that I have a high opinion about because of this French person that I knew in Singapore that I had a lot of respect towards. And after 10 interviews, I joined DataRobot, right? So that was my really the early years working as a data scientist. At DataRobot, I had a crazy journey. I I started as a data scientist, both starting on the product, like product engineering, and then I moved more towards customer-facing roles. And within a few years, I had to build the EMEA team of customer-facing data scientists, so like AI experts who work with customers to define solutions, deliver those solutions with our product that we had. Within 4 years, I had a team of 30 people, more or less, across EMEA. Then my role changed a few times as the company was evolving. So I joined DataRobot, it was 100 people. Eventually, I think at the peak, we were 2,000 employees. And in EMEA, I was the employee number 2 and or number 3, I think. And when at the peak, like in 2021, I think we were somewhere around like 200 in EMEA. And then I had at some point a global leadership role, then international. But after 8 years there, that's why I decided to probably like move to let's say a company that was more focused on data. What I realized is, as I was working with hundreds of projects with my customers, and my team was working on them, that there was this new space, the LLM space, that was completely changing the game, right? And data was important back in the days of like predictive machine learning, because garbage in, garbage out has always been the thing. But actually, I think it's you have a new concept here with LLMs. The inputs are unstructured, the outputs are unstructured. It's quite undefined. Even the way you evaluate an LLM is there are so many more complexities to it, which makes it much more risky technology to adopt and much harder actually to get to production grade. And that's why I kind of realized, look, I need to refocus myself on data, in particular data for LLMs and unstructured data, because that's where the world is moving to. And that's why I decided to join Snorkel. Snorkel, we're focused on data development for AI systems. And I believe it is like a space where, like, if you want to have your GenAI systems in production, you can't make it fully unsupervised. You need some human to actually kind of develop and improve the data to make the system production grade and to control it over time. And that's the space I'm in right now. So in terms of industry, I've worked extensively with financial services and insurance. Like I would say more than half of my engagements. I also worked a bit in healthcare, pharma companies, telco companies, and retail as well. I'd say retail was probably more common in DataRobot because we're more focused on predictive models, and that you have like an entire like demand forecasting, massive value in retail. At Snorkel, we're more focused on LLMs, so we see more chatbots and more customer support type of use cases. So it's kind of like a lot of consumer companies in FSI, in healthcare, in telco, a bit less retail, but we have as well. Yeah, so I hope that gives a good overview.
Oh, perfect. And obviously, I think I probably started following you while you were at Sky. We worked quite closely with Sky at the time as well too. And I think my question to you is that you've obviously, you started at the very start of the journey, 2011, 2012. That, I agree. I think that's when we were getting the terminology of data scientists through from our clients, and we're helping trying to define that as well too. And they were advising us as much as we were advising them, because let's be honest, like we're not the technical experts here. We have to react from the market. And I do remember working my very first data science role around that time. My question, probably my first question to you is, obviously moving from Sky to DataRobot, they're in a scale-up mode. Yeah. What advantages, in your opinion, could you glean from joining a company in a scale-up environment as opposed to maybe a larger organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, that's probably one of the best decisions I did in my career, in my life, I would say, is joining a scale-up, right? I mean, let's say that if you are in a corporate environment like Sky is an innovative company, and the way it's structured is try to be as innovative as possible. But like the difference and the step change that you have between this kind of corporate companies where their main business is still TV, right? Their main business is media, it's advertising. And you end up being like a function that could drive innovation, but you sometimes even have to fight for it, or you have to navigate a bit the politics that is not really even related to your job. Not saying I can't do this. I'm saying it's not what I want to focus on, right? Now, I went to DataRobot where everything was about innovation. Everything was about like getting the AI in the hands of the masses, right? And so you end up being like, first of all, as almost I was first on the ground almost in EMEA to do so many more things that are really at first at the cutting edge, but also more things. You learn more because it's so unstructured, it's so small. There are a lot of things you need to do from scratch, and then you realize, okay, all the processes I had in a large company, they were taken for granted. Some of them I didn't like them, but they were still there, and I had to go through them. Here I can define the processes. Here I can really have an impact, and be able to measure the impact that you have on day-to-day job is something that is makes you learn a lot, right? So you do so many more things. You are highly passionate and motivated because you're at the forefront of the innovation of your sector and what you're passionate about technically, but also you kind of see the industry evolve so fast, and you're constantly not biased towards only what you do, but also what the entire market does, right? As a scale-up, we had to engage with hundreds and hundreds of customers, right? So, all of those things combined made me thrive, I would say. I work with passion. There is a term, I can't remember who invented it, but they call the people who are performing at startups pirates, right? I'm very much a pirate. I want to change the status quo. I want to see the impact of what I do. I want to see my work feel valued for the rest of the people I work with. And that's something that you can do much more in a scale up, in addition to also just feeling at the forefront of the innovation, something that drives you on a day-to-day basis. And that's basically the reason why I literally, it's not about having no regrets, is that I thought it's the best decisions the best decision I made in my life, right?
Yeah.
And across 10 machine learning companies at that time, there were others, right? I remember Skytree, even H2O. H2O is still out there, but it's probably not as didn't go to the path that Dataorbit had, right? I actually know I met Databricks before and Dataku before I joined Dataorbit, so I could have picked other ones, right? But among 10 of them, not many made the cut and are still here today and went through that journey. We almost went IPO at some point, so I was lucky in a way. But if you select the right one and you work with people that you really believe are extremely smart and are working on something that's worth it, you can really achieve great things.
No, I agree. I think it's a calculated risk, and what I'm trying to get at as well too is defining the difference between a scale up and a startup. And I think there is a huge difference there. And I think with your joining the business at DataRobot, when there's 100 people, there's backing, there's funding, there's people there, there's a little bit of support structure. Not to say that there isn't in a startup, but coming from Sky to a complete startup might have been a step too far for most people. Where I think a bridging gap for a scale up is that they've already got products and maybe even a team in place there where you can join. So you've got the support structure, but you can still add value, you can still influence, you can still learn. You'll get given opportunities, like you said, that you wouldn't be given maybe in a larger organization. And I think it's good to talk to people like you in this capacity from that, to let people say, look, if you can take a calculated risk, your career could really move a lot quicker than maybe working for a larger company. But it does depend. It does depend on the situation.
Exactly. And within 4 years, I was chief data scientist in EMEA, at the VP level. I would probably never have reached this type of levels as fast if I was not in a scale up. If I had joined Google or whatever, it would have taken 10 years to reach the same level, right? Just even with very high performance. And that's where and it's a few reasons, right? I was one of the first. I was founding members, one of the founding members of EMEA. So there was that. So even though it's still a more established startup with some superstructure, some HR, some things that are there, in EMEA, it was pretty much I was office manager as well. I was this and that. I was running the events, a lot of other things you do, and you kind of get exposed to a much broader set of responsibilities. And that kind of also helps you mature quickly and helps create ownership in you. And I think sometimes the big corporate environments, they try to create ownership. They try to create accountability via performance gradings and some systems that are more established that are good when you're scaling, right? But a startup or scale up makes you feel owner and responsible and accountable much more, because if you don't do those things, they will not happen, right? No one else will do and jump in for you. And that is probably I like this environment. That's what drives me. I need that actually to sometimes motivate me. And that's kind of the growth I got was from that, and was from being also able to thrive in this environment. It's not for everyone, I will say, like 100%. There are people I would not recommend this kind of environment. When I went to and joined Snorkel, which is a much smaller company than what they thought it was when I left last year, I also knew I wanted to take this kind of challenge again, right? And I'm not recommending this kind of move to anyone, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, great. That's well put. And I can take some examples myself. Like I work for a small company, and sometimes it feels like the weight of the world's on my shoulders, having to, provide. But it does give you the opportunity to grow up, from a commercial perspective, business perspective, technical perspective. So I completely agree. I want to reframe the question as well too. And I want to move into the sort of GenAI space because that's what the topic's about. And I know it's obviously a topic that a lot of people are talking about right now, but I feel like you've got a lot of experience and really do know, got some good use cases and know how to sort of advise in this space. So my first question would be, what are some common GenAI projects you're seeing right now going into production?
Yeah. So I mentioned it, like GenAI and LLMs have revolutionized the world of AI and machine learning, and even the type of work data scientists are doing. And I think it puts a bit more at the forefront, first the skills around unstructured data and NLP, but also a bit more at the forefront, like the engineering skills, right? And also it kind of like the big change here is that it can bring like those kind of tools that you're creating as today with the current technologies around LLMs are much more business friendly, I would say, than are at least user friendly than what it used to be. With predictive modeling, which was the most standard approach, or even standard NLP techniques, the output would be either a number or, let's say, a class or an object or whatever it is, right? So to create an end-to-end system, you had to kind of like first create the model, but beyond the model, you had to actually create everything around it and really integrate the model into a business process. And then even people would not understand what the model does. Like you say, okay, this is the prediction. They would not even understand what it means. Like you talk to the business, they would not get it, right? Now, like the interface for LLMs is completely different. So it changes the game, right? Because it can be a chatbot, right? Now you have like almost in 2 lines of code. Once you have an LLM system, you can actually deploy a chatbot interface on top. That's decent, right? And that's can be used by any user. So making the output something that is understandable by natural language, like change the game. But the thing is that everyone got so excited. Everyone tried to do everything with it, and the expectation was sky high. And I think they're still sky high, by the way. But when I look at what goes to production, there are not that many of the systems, right? So I would classify maybe the main one that I see definitely in production now and already generating a lot of value are the code assist tools. I'm not saying it's still there yet for every type of engineer or everyone, but it is providing a massive head start. Like people are now much more productive, and you see geniuses on how to use AI, where 2-3 people are able to ship products faster than back in 3 years ago with the same type of, let's say, skills. Like they would take them like maybe 10 times less time than it used to be. And so those code assist tools, also it's like bridging the gap, because you talk to engineers with the users is not as hard, because these users are already used to looking at documentation and kind of hacking around, right? And so that's where I see like the first type of use of GenAI being really like at the forefront and in production already today is those code assist tools, right? And because you always have a human in the loop, like the engineer is still checking like the code that is given, and then they're kind of like modifying it, and it cannot ship if it doesn't work, right? They may introduce more like, let's say, bad coding practices. I don't know, actually. It's hard to evaluate that, but it definitely produces some productivity, in particular for more junior resources, and even for more senior as well, for the more mundane tasks. Yeah. So that's the first one. Second one, I would say like there is really 2 categories beyond like code assist, 2 categories of use cases when you think about it. And I'm talking about enterprise use cases. So use cases that, let's say, like either improves the process, optimizes resources, or increases revenue, like in some way by changing a bit the way someone works. And some of those use cases are kind of low risk, probably low stake, and doesn't require too much specialization. And sometimes the only specialization you may want to have, you may be content with a system that gives you an acceptance or response acceptance rate of like 70%. So accurate at 70%. Maybe you're content with that. So you just like chunking some documents into a RAG or even in the long context model. And then you end up like having a response that's at least informed with the document that you have. For maybe summaries, like for a finance team that wants to summarize contracts, or whatever it is, right? Those use cases that are low stake, where it's still heavily a human in the loop, it's more back-end focused. And very often it uses RAG as one of the techniques to actually specialize. Those ones, I can see them go into production. Because why? Well, they don't need too much specialization. They don't need too much like customization of, let's say, the retrieval system, of the generation system. They don't need too much evaluation of the results, because even if the answer is approximately correct, they may be fine with it, right? And so, I see that as, people who use this for creating summaries of contracts so that they kind of spend less time just like looking at a contract and extracting information. Like if you use it for, let's say, a low stake, let's say, use, not for something that will have like actual impact on the company revenue, well, yeah, maybe you should use LLMs and do that now. And with limited customization, you'll be able to go to production. So that's the ones I see. And then sometimes you need more customization. And I see some teams now finally managing to get those more customized LLMs and RAG systems into production for those type of use cases only. Backend, admin, limited risk tasks. So it's getting there for sure. But it's still very early days, I would say. Like, honestly, I will tell you numbers, like what I've seen. I've seen a bank who implemented a standard RAG architecture. I won't say which bank. I don't want to enter any confidential information. I talked to them 2 years ago. They say, oh, you're creating this RAG architecture that everyone can use, and engineers and data scientists. And a lot of teams started projects. They had, I think, 52 projects that were started. I checked in with them 6 months ago. They told me out of those 52 projects, I mean, I only knew 6 months ago that they had 52 projects eventually, but they told me basically out of 52 projects, there are basically 46 of them have already failed. So they were tried, they were a good test, but it didn't go to production. There are 4 of them where they maybe dropped out, and maybe 1 or 2 that kind of like are now finally going through MRM and validations that potentially could go to production. So you see, it's not by providing a standard off-the-shelf architecture that you will necessarily go to production. But for very low risk, very low impact, you can definitely do that. That's no problem, right? With off-the-shelf tools. And finally, the other type of potential use that I see go to production now is kind of companies that's and it's similar to what I said in 2, right? Companies who want to have a simple assistant that is not too specialized, that is not also low stake, low risk, that is more for personal use. So a plain old ChatGPT, but inside a company. That is not where, even if you tell it some personal information or company confidential information, it won't be a business risk, right? So those ones are also going to production, but they almost given that as a service where, okay, it's kind of a ChatGPT internally, pretty much. Not too specialized. It may be wrong. Be careful when you use it. However, it's there. It's available, right? And it's internal use as well. I see a few companies who are now finally putting, let's say, chatbots or LLMs that are exposed externally. They're either highly controlled, like prompt guard. Basically, they don't answer most questions. Or they have gone through literally a year of iteration and evaluation to make sure that it's really low risk or lower risk than a human, right? At least, yeah. So that's what I see, but it's really the early days. Honestly, I kind of compare that to when I said I joined. I started to be in the machine learning world in 2013, right, or 2012. We are in the 2014 of LLMs, I'll be honest, right? Early days. And it took until 2019-20 for companies to get more mature on the space, right? There are a lot of things that need to come. There is no single approach. We're so far away from having a mature technology here.
I think as an end user, you can already see the benefit of things like chatbots. I know, if from working in industry, with people like yourself, when if it's a client, a customer facing chatbot, if they're using it correctly or to the best of their ability. Because if it's good, you don't have an issue. If it's bad, within a few seconds. It's that illusion you're trying to create, where you feel you might be speaking to a human, and it's difficult from company to company. You can there's varying levels of success. What I've noticed as well too, and obviously mentioning ChatGPT, I don't want to talk too much about this, but you are right. We're in the sort of 2014. It's the Wild West of LLMs and ChatGPT and all this stuff, because there are loads of stories of people using ChatGPT, open source software, and putting personal details, company details, code onto this platform. And I feel that the innovation that's happening right now it's moving at a pace too quick in some respects for governance and procedure in place. So there's been a lot of people have been caught out. And I think this loops into my next question, and it might be relevant, but like what common errors are companies making when they start their AI journey?
Yeah, so I think it's like mirrors a bit what we said. I think the biggest mistake is to underestimate what it takes to go to production. So I'll explain it, right? Today, you can really spin off within, let's say, an hour for a use case, like a simple use case. You can spin off a chatbot that kind of seems to be doing a bit what you're asking within an hour. I say a chatbot, it doesn't need to be a chatbot. It could be like a more specialized task, but why? Because you have tools for creating the interface that are very effective. That didn't exist 10 years ago, by the way, those tools. You have the LLM. LLM is actually a very versatile type of mechanism, meaning that it's versatile in terms of inputs, in outputs, it's unstructured. It's actually it's smart in so many ways. It's also very dumb in so many ways, but it's there, right? It kind of exists as a technology. And those two things combined, now it's so easy to actually just spin off like a demo. And we see actually companies who are overselling a bit, what they can do, right? Because they've not even themselves delivered, in production, and they just they have a nice demo, and this demo resonates, and everyone gets excited, and so it's very easy to get excited. But the production, so the barrier to get to a demo is much lower. Back in the days with predictive machine learning, I could not in an hour have a decent model that gives me something that I can show to the business or I can show as a demo. Why? Because I had to create a custom interface depending on what you predict, how to integrate this prediction. There was a bit more thinking to do of how to integrate with something that matters, right? Whereas a chatbot, well, everyone understands a chatbot. So the barrier to demo is very low. And then the barrier to production is much, much higher. Yeah, because unstructured outputs, in particular, open-ended chatbots. And it's not only that, even if it's the LLM is just doing some other tasks that are more specialized, there are so many things that could go wrong that is very hard to anticipate in the first place when you start building them. From a governance standpoint, it kind of you don't only need to check only accuracy and maybe bias. You need to check accuracy, bias, whether the answer is controversial, whether it's kind of it's the right tone, whether it respects your company's policies, whatever, right? Whereas when you have a predictive model giving you a number, well, the number will respect your company policy. Worst case, you put some threshold, right? In the LLM world, well, you actually have to understand if it's giving an answer that you can't actually give, you have to understand how to address it, how to change it, right? And even how, in which cases it actually gives you this bad answer. Just this evaluation becomes so much more important, and that becomes a massive barrier. So you're thinking about FSI, financial services and insurance. Very often they're regulated industries. They won't let an LLM like this lose unless it's extremely low risk, and then you have to justify why it's very, very low risk. They will never let those LLMs in the short term until they have a proper process for governance, a proper process for understanding the inputs, the outputs, and showing the outputs are not risky. And that's just, I'm talking about risk is one thing, but there are just the fact actually they those systems. Those demos you have, they may perform well on 2 or 3 toy questions you've created because you have actually tested it a bit. Oh yeah, this question works well. This question doesn't work. I won't ask this question in demo. I will ask this other one, right? People do that all the time. And when it comes to production, well, the user is left with a chatbot interface where they can ask anything, literally. So you need to think and put yourself in the hands of the user, or in the mind of the user, right? You need to start controlling what goes into the system. so many more controls that you need to have in place, so many more ways to evaluate in a very specialized way. Its evaluation becomes custom for each use case. You can have standards that are like you can somehow make off the shelf and repeatable, but beyond the standards, every single use case will have their own thinking. Like you need to think through a lot of things on how it's used and what could go wrong in order to be able to go to production. So this gap is massive. And so, that's what that's the main common error, is not thinking through the problem, is actually underestimating that gap. And it's countless companies I talk to who are now in this phase of understanding that actually it's much harder than they thought. They underestimated the gap, and now they are like, okay, what do I actually need to do if I want this to go to production? Because this could have $10 million of value, right? And that's where I think also where I start engaging with some clients is I prefer engaging with those ones that have already made the mistake and realize there is something that needs to be done, rather than trying to educate everyone. Right?
It's funny that you mentioned that. Like I'm going through something right now. I had an account hacked. I had 2FA on there. Someone's hacked it. I'm going through. I'm trying to explain to this chatbot what's happened. It's obviously to a point where it doesn't know what to do, so it just keeps answering the same answer for different questions, and you're just like, I need to speak to a human at this point, and it wouldn't let you. So there's definitely bad examples out there. I'm going through that right now. It's a nightmare. But in terms of, obviously, we mentioned governance as well too. What other persistent technical challenges do you see that need to overcome when you go to production?
So governance is one, but linked to governance is actually data. And data is really linked to governance. For example, you can't have, if you are, let's say, have an enterprise ChatGPT or whatever it is, you can't have PII information of employees be fed into that system. So you need the governance in the data. So the data itself needs to somehow be created in the first place. You can't have company information that's highly controversial, that to be fed into those LLMs, right? Because they will start spreading it out, right? This information, and you have to control this. So governance is also part of data. So, but at the end of the day, the challenge is high quality data. People, because it was so easy to get demos spin off and be able to show something that seems to be amazing, but you actually control what you show, right? People thought it was actually less punitive to have bad data going into the systems. I'd say it's a bit less punitive in some ways, but it's also much more punitive in other ways, but in much more, I would say, in sneakier ways. It's very, very hard to understand what can be the impact of bad data on the systems until you thoroughly evaluate them, right? And that's a massive challenge for the industry, is the lack of high quality data. High quality data, to make sure that your system is accurate, to make sure that the system is not controversial, to make sure that your system is not spitting PII or PHI information, because all of those are potentially either needs to be reached because of governance perspective or because from an accuracy standpoint, it won't be useful until you reach a certain level of accuracy or completeness. That's so many things that could go wrong, and the data can take so many different shapes and form, because now it can be fully unstructured without any problem. And what you realize is that to have high quality and good data, you somehow need to have a human sense check a lot of things in the process, right? So you need this feedback, but for more complex specialized system, you need kind of a subject matter expert to actually give this feedback. And that's a massive challenge itself. So it's, and data here, it's in a broad sense. There is a data for evaluation. So how do you find where the problems of the system are? So you may need to look at the prompt response pairs and have a human look at it, or maybe another LLM look at it and say, okay, this one makes sense, or this one may lack this and that, right? You may need the subject matter expert feedback in some cases. You may need data that is high quality for fine-tuning your model. You may need data that is high quality to augment your retrieval system, enrich metadata in your document. There are so many things you could do with high quality data, and that's really one of the key points here. That's, I think, a barrier that tends to be underestimated, but the garbage in, garbage out has been even more, let's say, is even more true in the world of GenAI, despite what some people think. They don't realize it yet.
So, that goes on to one of my questions in regards to, talent within the industry. Obviously, this is a new school and a new train of thought for data scientists. What types of, if you could give advice, what types of commercial projects or even educational pieces should aspiring data scientists look at if they want to get into this environment, to become a GenAI specialist, so to speak?
Yeah. So you're asking like particular commercial project they need to
if they're working in a data science, for instance, if they're working in a data science team for a Sky or a Virgin Media, how can they push their work to focus more within a GenAI space? What type of, because that could be an environment that they might not have too many examples to use. So where could they sort of?
I would say actually, so it's like I would advise two things here. One, in this world, in a fast changing and fast-paced environment such as AI, I don't think there's been any technology that has evolved as fast and grown as fast as AI right now, and also with as many investment as it is, right? So, like, it's very important. People need to keep up to date. I don't think it's even more important than ever, right? I realize, and I've actually met a few like recently, like. Again, I won't comment where and who, but I like people who kind of like are very decent data scientists, but they're decent data scientists as of the definition of 3 years ago. The thing is, the world has evolved so much, and they have not really caught up. They have not really been curious enough outside their job to really like open their eyes that there is an entire like revolution happening out there within their sector where their skills could be highly valuable, but need to be up to date. So I would just advise people to just go out there, like. Honestly, the easiest place to look at is go on OpenAI library, just use it. Just use like GPT, and this actually there are examples and it explains the different concepts. Just that documentation has a lot, just to start with, right? Beyond that, you have a number of courses. I won't say specifically which courses to do, but I would really encourage people to kind of go out there, go on Twitter, go on LinkedIn, go on look at like the top companies in the sector, like. Which are like it's easy. Like I ask even whatever, like ChatGPT or whatever, DeepSeek. You can ask them like, okay, give me like a few resources online where I can look at or top companies I can follow to make sure I keep up to date with what's happening in AI, and they will give it to you, right? And now it's just about the time and effort you put in and the passion that you have doing it. I would advise that. Not all companies will be super advanced or mature in LLMs, but it's coming out there. If your company is not doing it, either they'll be disrupted or at some point they will suddenly massively invest in it, right? That's my take here. And so that's the first thing I would encourage. Then based on those learnings, like look at could be side projects or things that you do, like companies often give you a 10%, innovation time when you're in these kind of jobs where you can do other things and explore new technologies. Like then take an LLM project, try to show it around, try to get people excited. Like look at like a use case that people would care about, like interact with the business and just ask the right questions to find out what may matter, and then use that in your like side project and then show it to them, and then there will be probably like unlocking connections that could help you actually drive innovation within your company. So that's the way I would recommend people to do it. Now, which use case, what to do, it really depends on the industry you're in. It really depends on what's but there are so many examples out there. Again, like if you don't know, if you don't have an idea, you can always ask DeepSeek to give you some ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I was trying to get at, and I was using the media companies aforementioned, just because you've come from those types of organizations. Not to say that they're probably doing good things in this space as well too. And I think it's just not waiting for something to happen. Being proactive is easier to say. Yeah. We both know that. It's easy to say to be proactive. But when you're working on really interesting projects or projects that just need to be done, you might not be able to get your head out there, your head up effectively to look at new things, and that's where you probably need to use your own spare time to keep up to date. But I do feel if people want to benefit from this new wave of technology and way of working and thinking, they do need to go out of their comfort zone slightly. But I appreciate the insight as well. I think you're right, but there will be some people going, that's easier said than done, and I do get that too, because we all have those. I
agree. Exactly, like, and some people there's a moment in their life where they can't afford it. What I would recommend then is, before it's too late, they should either like find a job where they can have on their day-to-day job at least a portion of it focus on those kind of projects that they can learn, where they, in their normal work hours they can do it, or like just like take some time off and do it. Like it's not again easier said than done, but a 2 week someone like just for 2 weeks like spending time trying to learn about it and you should catch up. Like there are courses you can do over 2 weeks. Like it changes your perception, it changes the view of what you're doing. And I'm not saying that LLMs is the answer to everything. Like not everything is a chatbot. Not everything needs to be a chatbot. But actually the techniques are now much broader than what it used to be in terms of like solving problems. And it has to be part of the arsenal of every single AI expert or data scientist. Like it can't be the opposite, right? It can't be someone just doing statistics. Even if you actually mainly focus on statistics because that's nature of your job and you're a highly regulated industry where it needs to be like that. Like, believe me, you can all still leverage LLMs as an interface to interact with the model. That makes it much user-friendly, business-friendly. And that is also changing how how you think about the overall solution and problem.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And it's just funny because we talked about 2012, 2011. There was an advent, there was a change, there was a definition between data scientist and data analyst. All this is just another iteration of that. There'll be a difference between someone who focuses purely on LLMs and specializes in GenAI, and maybe someone who works more on traditional data science pieces as well too. So there's always going to be a place for people. My example is always, well, from day one in my job, I was helping hire SaaS enterprise guides, SaaS consultants. They still exist, right? So that's a niche role. It's a market, and that'll still exist and probably will for the future, and they'll innovate. And it has changed, but maybe not at the pace of a data scientist. I'm sure it has, but maybe I'm being wrong there. Probably have a lot of SaaS people having a go at me there on that one. But same econometrics, do a lot of work in market effectiveness, market mix modeling. Fundamentally, it's not changed so much over the last 10 years since I've been working those types of vacancies. I'm sure it has to a certain degree, but within data science specifically, it's by definition, it is quite an innovative career choice to have. You always need to be at the forefront of technology. So I think it's a little bit different in that capacity. Same with data engineering. We're seeing a big change there in data engineering to ML engineering, AI engineering, and then there's roles are mixing together now. So I think over the next, and I've said this on a podcast previously, the next 6 to 12 months, we'll start to see new fancy job titles getting defined in the market and industry. I'm sure that'll come from the US and bring over to the UK. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can define it ourselves.
We'll see. Maybe China as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%. Can't forget about them. Look, I want to go back on topic. So apologies for going off topic there, but I thought it's good to get your thoughts on this. But we talked briefly about financial services, and obviously they need to go through a lot more checks and balances before they implement certain GenAI solutions, and rightfully so. What other blockers are preventing production of AI projects that you've worked on, and how do you overcome that?
I'll take AI in general, but I'm putting the context of GenAI, like one big blocker that people underestimate beyond like this capture production and the data. We talked a lot about this, is trust. The trust that people have in the system you're building. And with LLMs, it's so easy to lose trust, right? And that's where it's so easy to roll out something that with a standard infrastructure that is okay, but not great. And this not great, it can go really wrong. So you put it in the hands of the business. You may set expectations, but the expectations are always sky high. So it's all about managing it down, but you will never be able to manage it down enough. There will always be something going wrong. You put it in the hands of the business and something really wrong happens. And then because of that, you end up having literally probably emails exchanged between people. This is saying this doesn't work. Oh, look at how wrong this is. There are also some people who are still skeptical about AI and who will actually try to find those errors, trying to find those bad things, right? And that's even more true in the world of LLMs because it's so hard to control what goes out, right? I'll just give an example. I can't give which customer it was specifically, but my team was working with the US government federal agency. And we were creating this model that basically, I can't talk about the use case too much, but every day was giving one prediction. This prediction was seen by the governor of a state in the US and was used for some decision making. I mean, not business, but I guess at least administrative decision making. And this number was also given with a range of what this number could be. It was a prediction, a forecast, right? And there was one day where this number was really wrong and just off the grid of the range, right? Maybe the governor didn't look at it on that day, but someone else did, and sent an email to everyone and said, "Look, how can this be so wrong? What is this system? Where is it coming from?" Maybe this was one out of 100 times where it was wrong, really wrong, right? It happens. That's the thing, is that it's uncertainty. You can't fully control it. But this 1 in 100 created an entire drama, and that went to even the ears of the governor, right? And so it came back to us as a vendor, and eventually we had to firefight. And the thing is that you're a data scientist, you're trying to build trust. You will never build trust if you just create a system, ship it, and that's it, right? You will create trust by involving them into the decision making that goes into the model. You involve them as early enough. You make the business, the people who deliver, to specify how they want it. You become just almost the advisor and the executor of their will, but they need to take ownership of the system. No one went to go and defend the fact that the system reacted in a certain way because of this and that reason, because no one felt owner of that or felt accountable for it, right? And eventually, everything was put on the vendor who had delivered something. And obviously, it was a lesson learned for me, for my team. That's how to engage the business to deliver to much more extensively, how to create joint accountability, how to educate them on what's actually happening in the system in a way where they fully understand it. And where if someone says, why is it so wrong? Someone else in the company who actually knows their stuff, not the data scientist, will be able to say, yeah, that's because of this and that and this. Well, it can happen. Well, it's fine. We can measure this risk. Maybe let's mitigate it next time. No one was able to do this until the data scientist was pointing the figure at. And that's the thing, is that here we're talking about a predictive model that is pretty much within certain boundaries and just one number. Well, if you think about an unstructured system relying on unstructured data with an output that literally could say anything, that this kind of problems, they will still happen. Maybe once in a blue moon, maybe once every year. But that's when they happen, you can lose the entire trust and that's a massive problem because once you lose trust with someone who is very busy, who has a lot of priorities, they will then go and think about other ways, other approaches to do it. Maybe they won't succeed, but at least it's too late, right? Yeah. So you won't be able to go much to save it. It's much harder to save trust.
I know that feeling. All it takes is one bad CV, or not bad CV, incorrect CV to lose trust in some people. Sometimes from a recruitment perspective, so I get that, and then you only get one chance. I think what I'm trying to say is from that perspective, I think in terms of blockers, initially, I think a lot of non-technical stakeholders at senior level were not apprehensive. Sorry, I think they were like, yeah, that sounds like a great solution. We'll implement that into the business, and we'll get all sorts from it as well too. And I think that might have caused disaster effectively. So it's kind of leaving someone else at the wheel. And you're definitely correct in saying that having that stakeholder element and focus with the client. Or the end user is paramount, because they're not going to be technical specialists. And I think having people like yourself who make them feel like they could be, or understand what you're talking about in a simplistic way, and being able to translate that is so important. It's so important. And then it involves them too, because if it's too complex and abstract, they don't even want to hear about it. Exactly. So they'll just blame blame the organisation when there is a problem. So, 100% agree with that. Yeah. In terms, any other blockers you think that you've run into right now at all? Is that in terms of the projects you've worked on?
Yeah, data governance. I think one is introducing bad practices, technical debt that eventually makes it so slow to just continue updating, or adding more models into your environment, right? Whether it's bad practices on how you use, let's say your servers, whether it's not thinking on how to monitor the model that you have put in place. So eventually you need to spend so much time just to maintain them or to make sure that you keep the lights on. All of those, or you don't involve, let's say, the SME, subject matter experts. So this kind of technical debt aspect is something that I think, because we're in such an immature technology, such a new space where there are so many ways to do things. Like there's no playbook to do it well, and people just do like whatever works, right? And you end up like doing it in a way that where you cut corners here and there, and then you introduce technical debt. So I do think it is some of a big blocker that kind of doesn't necessarily prevent production for one or two use cases, but it prevents scale. You will never reach scale if you introduce too much technical debt. So you have to think through the system and how it's used, like, and do all this thinking like as you go, but also beforehand that you don't do that, right? Like create like not also reinventing the wheel every time. Not creating standards. When you do, for example, I talked about data governance, talk about PII, PHI, or on this kind of data that needs to be checked before, right? You don't need to create it every time you have a new use case. You could have potentially repeatable way to do it where that gets shared across the company, right? Like people don't do that and end up having those big systems where there are plenty of calls to LLMs that are not useful, that doesn't scale, has to weigh like very high costs. And this is, or even do too much prompt engineering on one particular model that is, like because there are so many LLMs, they would just do everything with one LLM, and they eventually get very biased towards this LLM. They create prompts that are very so specific to that LLM. They move to another LLM, all their prompts need to be built from scratch, right? Or they even move to a new version, need to be built from scratch, or not from scratch, but a lot of it can be reused. And those are the things that people don't think about enough when they start projects, and that could prevent production, but in particular prevent moving to scale.
Okay. Are there any LLM innovations that you judge that would be essential to help reach production and adoption right now?
Yeah. What I would say here is the fact that there is a lack of, as I said just in the last question, a lack of playbooks, a lack of templates and standards, because we are so early and are constantly new technologies being released. You don't want to create too many templates that are also inflexible, because when the next technology comes in, you will have to like you want to actually use the latest innovation. So you need to find this trade-off. But I do think one thing that's here to stay is evaluating the output of an LLM. And this evaluation, there is a part of it that needs to be kind of like almost standardized, right? Like a company needs to create templates and standards that allows them to check whether an LLM is compliant with whatever, the EU AI Act, GDPR, whatever it is, right? And those standards, like those methodologies to test the systems, to evaluate it across those dimensions, right now there's not much out there. Like there are more and more, like let's say research techniques for evaluating simple, let's say, output measures, such as is the answer complete, is the answer like fair, or whatever it is, right? But those things, like it's used for those broad, let's say, ChatGPT like the type of systems that are being developed and the state of the art is moving around them. But you don't have enough like even templates that companies can reuse or use to actually make sure that your system is compliant with the EU AI Act or the GDPR or this or that clause or whatever it is that specific, or not even templates on how to actually integrate the subject matter experts into like this evaluation, because it needs you always need some custom evaluation that is specific to your use case. So I do think we need as an industry to have many more tools related to it. Right now, it's pretty much manual. A lot of people are very blindly looking at outputs and saying, yeah, like looks good. Oh, yeah, it seems that this problem is here. Maybe let me fix that in the data, or let me fix that in the prompt. It is not like an approach that's standardized enough. And I do think like whether we have agentic workflows, RAG, LLMs, LCMs, whatever it is, you will always need an evaluation of the output and the input, right? Whatever it is. And then whatever happens in the middle. And this evaluation needs standard metrics to look at, but also needs humans, right? And those are the things where I do think we need much more innovation right now if we want to actually help bridge this gap. Gap to production involves understanding what the system may fail, and involve also you having an approach that's effective for that, right? So yeah, that's the one thing. I think that's something that's already started that will be well needed, because in evaluation, we talked a lot about LLM as a judge as well, as a way to evaluate that's automated, that involves less human. But like LLM as a judge is only possible with inference costs that are low enough. So if you want a system that's very well controlled, you need to have almost LLMs to control it, so otherwise it doesn't scale. And humans also control it in some way, but the humans' feedback needs to be targeted. In addition to this, if you want to have all those LLMs that control an LLM and you want those LLMs to be like high quality, you can't have that when like the cost per token is as high as today. At least you can't have that at scale. At least not at the scale we need to really go to production with many use cases. So these inference costs of LLMs need to continue dramatically dropping. I've read somewhere it was one of the most deprecating assets ever in the tech industry. I'm not surprised. It needs to continue. Like the Moore law is here with a very, very high, let's say, slope. And I hope it will continue because if we really want a world that relies a lot on LLMs everywhere, and I'm not saying LLMs is AI in general, we need to have also a great way, a cheap way to evaluate and control the systems. And that means having a lot of calls to different LLMs, right? If you want to scale that. So yeah, apart from this, I think a lot of innovations around agentic workflows is still, we are the infancy, literally, even an agentic workflow that analyzes standard documents or let's say financial reports or whatever. Like there is no standard approach right now. Like everyone will do their own way. There are a few patterns that start emerging, but we're so much in the early days of it. Think of it like we are like on the first year where scikit-learn was released back in the days of, let's say, standard machine learning. And now when people start adding techniques on top and they realize this techniques works better than this other one. So those are like some of the things I see the industry moving towards for changing. The other probably 2 or 3. Let me give you 1 or 2. Multimodal needs to be much better. We're still too early there. Like we start having better language visual models, but then like other modalities need to be integrated as well. And finally, like having very small models that can run on the edge, that can run, like even in a production line where there's a very small system and in a safe and controlled way. Yeah. So those are some of the things I can think about that could help move the needle here.
That's great. You kind of hit a point there as well too with accessibility. I've never really thought of it like that, but it does create an environment where everyone can use these tools and benefit from it, and end users can buy products and services that aren't astronomical. And I think that it's just nice to see in this environment, having that type of technology open to everyone. Usually you'd expect this to be locked, behind some sort of paywall. So, and I know many of it is, but for at least the baseline, it gives the ability for people to learn, develop, and utilize it correctly. Because that's the way it needs to happen that way. If it's only for a few people, then it's never going to grow. So I think it needs that access. My last question to you. And it's kind of around the future and what you predict, and but also about what you're seeing right now too. So, what are your thoughts on what's the most exciting GenAI use cases in production you've seen so far?
Yeah, good one. So exciting ones. The things I'm excited about is when I see the technology really get to a point where it actually has tangible value for business, right? So I probably won't be exciting for everyone. I'd love to tell you I have a use case in an NGO right now that that is doing making the world much better. But some of the exciting use cases that I've seen now is use cases where I told you a lot of them are internal. They're kind of focused on low risk. But I see some of those use cases where they're kind of measuring on very mundane tasks that typically a human would still do, that they can perform better or they can perform at least as good, and they're measuring it repeatedly in a very a controlled way, and they start opening function calls, as they call it, to those LLMs. That's what I'm excited about it, right? Because I'm okay, well, we finally moved to a technology that is transformative, where you can actually even in front of customers potentially have mundane tasks that's who has not been frustrated by a customer support portal who is not well optimized, where people are completely lost and you need to call 5 times and 5 different numbers to get something out, right? Who has not been frustrated? Everyone has, right? And that's because we don't use technologies well enough right now. And I think we're getting there. We're getting seeing the value of this technology to get there. Is, as you said earlier, rough edges everywhere. The chatbot is impossible to get you to answer the question well, but we're seeing some other tasks or some more specialized tasks where the chatbot can be open a bit more, or like the LLM can be driving the responses. And I'm like, well, that's good, because it means that people can get help much faster, right, than they could in the past, right? Obviously, it means that also people need to change a bit how they work, right? Because that's like every transformational technology is coming. But I'm excited by the fact that we're reaching that point, even with, honestly, LLMs having many flaws and still being so nowhere near when it needs to be for to reach AGI. I think the world is changing, but I like seeing this kind of change and how positive that could impact like how someone interacts with customer support in a better way, and like that's what excites me. It's kind of seeing this innovation going forward. And from a year ago to now, I see many more of those. Still very much like across like the customers I interact with, maybe it's a 5% who cannot get there. We are able to open up the LLM to like customer facing interactions, but it is coming, and I find it's quite exciting, right? So that's in the world of GenAI, like some of the exciting ones I've seen. Yeah. Don't know if you have other ideas or other things you find exciting.
There's loads of examples. I think my head always goes to, for some reason, defense applications. So there's exciting stuff there. I wouldn't say it was going to benefit that many people, though, let's be honest with you. So I think it'd be good to see more applications of AI, just like you said, working for the betterment of society and helping people. I think that's going to be paramount in the future, and I think it will happen. I think it will. So yeah, I think more and more that. Obviously, it's the commercial application's going to need to go first before everything else, as usual, because they're the ones with the money. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see cross benefits from it. Look, Andre, we're about out of time, but I really appreciate your time and insight. You're a true specialist in this space, and it's been great to talk to you. Where can our listeners reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so probably best is on LinkedIn. You can find my name. That is probably the easiest way. I'm also on Twitter. You can find me. So my Twitter handle will be Andre, my first name, Balg, last name, all in one word. So yeah, that's where you could find me. Otherwise, in London, that's where I am. Even though like I may travel. I travel quite a lot, but I'm always up for
Good. It's an absolute pleasure again. Thanks, buddy, and all the best.